So, when you think of Sri Lankan style, what comes to mind? Is it, ancient temples? Or maybe those classic colonial bungalows? Or perhaps even sleek modern villas? Well, the amazing thing is, it's all of that and so much more. We're going to dive into this incredible story of how geography, trade, and centuries of culture all just blended together to create something truly unique in the world of design.
In this quote, it just nails it. The key thing to get is that Sri Lanka has never been isolated. For literally centuries, it's been this bustling crossroads on the Indian Ocean trade routes. So it makes perfect sense that its style is a direct reflection of that rich, incredibly layered history. It's a fusion.
All right, first up, this idea of a serendipitous fusion. I love that phrase because it captures it perfectly. This wasn't some planned-out style. Nope, it just happened organically, all thanks to the island's unique spot in the world.
This is so cool. You can actually hear this fusion in action. I mean, just picture it. You're in Kandy in the evening. You've got these deep rhythmic drums coming from the Temple of the Tooth Relic, this incredibly sacred Buddhist place. And then, at the same time, you hear the sound of Christian evensong from a chapel just down the road. And here's the thing, they don't clash. They actually meld together and create this totally new, unique atmosphere. That right there, that's the soul of Sri Lankan style in a nutshell.
Okay, so to really understand this, we've got to go back to the beginning. Before any ships arrived, before any outside influence, Sri Lanka had its own powerful design language, one that was shaped completely by the climate and local traditions. This is the bedrock, the vernacular foundation.
And it all starts with one simple idea: the pavilion. Seriously, forget everything you know about solid walls and enclosed rooms. In a hot, rainy, tropical climate, what do you really need? You need a giant umbrella. And that's basically what this is. A simple, open-sided building with a huge overhanging roof. It's the most fundamental building block of Sri Lankan architecture. It's totally designed to be inside out, blurring that line between the building and the beautiful landscape around it.
And the connection to the land was just everything. The materials they used were simple, they were local, and honestly, they were incredibly smart. We're talking walls made of woven branches and mud, that's warichi, roofs made from plaited coconut fronds, and get this, the floors, often covered in cow dung. Now, I know what you're thinking, but it's actually a natural termite repellent. Super clever. Everything came from right there. The more permanent stuff, like lime wash or clay tiles, that was usually reserved for the elite or for religious buildings, which made them really pop against the lush green landscape.
So you have this really strong indigenous foundation. And then come the new layers. Over a span of about 450 years, European powers show up, one after the other, and each one leaves its own distinct mark, adding all this new complexity and character to the style.
So here's a quick rundown of how that went. First, you've got the Portuguese, arriving in 1505. They introduce Catholicism, building these Baroque churches, and bring in new furniture styles. Then in 1658, the Dutch take control. They're all about the spice trade, and they bring those high-pitched roofs, stucco, and really heavy, exuberant Baroque furniture. And then finally, from 1796, it's the British. They impose these grand neoclassical styles for their big state buildings and really develop that iconic plantation bungalow, the one with the verandas all the way around.
And if you look at the Dutch and British periods side by side, the differences are pretty stark. The Dutch, they were all about these big, imposing townhouses, usually inside a fort. Life revolved around this huge central hall, the zaal. Their furniture was heavy, really solid. But the British, they were focused on the countryside with their plantation bungalows. For them, the most important space was the veranda. It was this perfect in-between space for relaxing, for meeting people. Their furniture got lighter, more decorative, and they added all these cool details like Gothic arches and fancy fretwork.
And the way the British designed their bungalows, it tells you so much about how they lived. It was built on two really big ideas. First, the veranda was everything. It was for catching the breeze, sure, but it was also a kind of social buffer zone. And second, they were very particular about separating the staff quarters. The kitchen would be connected by a long corridor, but always placed downwind. Why? To keep the smells of all that amazing spicy cooking away from the main house. It's a design that really reveals an entire way of life.
Okay, so that brings us into the 20th century. And this is where things get really interesting. After Sri Lanka gains independence, there's this deliberate push to create a new national identity. And that meant forging a new style, one that felt modern, but was also, without a doubt, Sri Lankan.
This was a huge turning point. See, it would have been easy to just copy European modernism, right? Just build a bunch of concrete boxes. But instead, a new generation of architects started asking a really important question. How do we make this ours? So they looked back to their own traditions, back to those open pavilions, the local materials, and they started fusing all of that with modern ideas about space and light and form.
And leading this charge was the absolutely incredible Minette da Silva. I mean, what a pioneer. She was one of the very first qualified female architects in all of Asia. And her mission was so clear. She wanted to create a style that was new and vital, but at the same time, essentially Sri Lankan. And the way she did it was brilliant. She deliberately brought local artisans right into her modern designs. Weavers, carvers, metalworkers, their craft became part of the architecture itself.
And here's a little detail I just love. Her friend, the famous modernist architect Le Corbusier, the legend, he affectionately called her my little bird. That just goes to show you her standing in the world. This wasn't some isolated movement happening on an island. It was part of a global conversation about modernism, but with a powerful, uniquely Sri Lankan voice.
And then there's Geoffrey Bawa. If Minette da Silva was the pioneer who opened the door, Bawa was the one who walked through it and basically defined the whole style for decades to come. This is the guy who really reshaped things. He actually started out as a lawyer, but after traveling the world, he came back to Sri Lanka with this newfound passion for design, and his work, well, it changed everything. And this quote from his biographer really gets to the heart of Bawa's genius. His work wasn't just about what a building looked like, it was about how it felt. It was about the senses. The feeling of a breeze moving through a room, the sound of water in a courtyard, the way light filters through the trees outside. He was a master at blending that traditional, vernacular idea of living with nature with a really sophisticated modern approach to space.
So, after all that history, where are we now? Well, we've landed in a place where the style is alive, it's always evolving, and it's just incredibly diverse. Let's take a look at what Sri Lankan design looks like today.
What's so cool is that what's happening today is just a continuation of that same story of fusion that's been going on for centuries. Designers are pulling inspiration from all over the world, but they're always putting their own unique Sri Lankan twist on it, reinventing it again and again.
And to show you the range, let's look at a couple of examples. On one end of the spectrum, you've got something like Helga's Folly. I mean, wow, this is designed as pure theater. It's just an explosion of personality, where literally no surface is left untouched. You've got exquisite antiques right next to plastic flowers, walls covered in old gossip columns. It is a total rejection of minimalism and a full-on celebration of creative joy. It's just wonderfully eccentric. And then you have the complete polar opposite. Check this out, a neo-modernist home of concrete and glass. This is all about clean lines, a super calm, minimal palette of white plaster and timber. The whole point is to create this serene gallery for contemporary art and let the outside in. The fact that both of these wildly different places can be called Sri Lankan style, that tells you everything about how broad and inclusive this design language has become.
So with all this diversity, what's the common thread? What are the ingredients that keep showing up? Well, there are a few key things. First, that sense of openness, always connecting to the environment. Second, simplicity, not necessarily minimal, but a simple, clear way of organizing space. Third, a love of local materials. You'll see terracotta tiles, polished cement, and beautiful tropical hardwoods everywhere. Fourth, a deep respect for craftsmanship. That connection to local arts is still so important. And finally, the big one, fusion. That serendipitous, magical mix of elements that just feels uniquely of the island.
Which kind of leaves us with this one big question, right? If architecture is history made visible, what story does Sri Lanka tell the world? I think it's a story about resilience, about adaptation. It's about the beautiful, completely unexpected things that happen when cultures don't just live side by side, but actually blend together to create something brand new. It's a story about finding harmony in diversity.